welcome back to the Dune Hippie Machine channel. Today, I'm working on this F150. I just finished welding up the radius arm mounts on the beams. Got both of them done there. These is where we got one here. The radius arm bolts to the back side of the beam there. So just got those all done. And now, ready to jump over to the truck and get some work done on this thing, so that way we can get those fitted up on there. Kind of first things I'm going to have to be doing is a little bit more kind of demo, or I don't know what you call it, prep. But I need to come in here, remove this brake master cylinder and all the brake lines, get that out of there. And then, before I can make the beam pivots, that's kind of what I'm going to be working on, is making the beam pivots. I've already drawn some beam pivots up in CAD. They're ready to cut out on my plasma table right there. I'll probably end up cutting one out, set it in there, and then we'll start throwing beams under there and working on mounting the wheels in the center of the fender here for clearance. All that fun stuff. I've kind of gotten videos before. When I was doing the Chevy, I made a lot of different videos on it, and I'll kind of do that again. We'll touch some different stuff. But as far as here, before I can do any of that, we have the factory cross member in here. It's been hacked and modified for the beams that were on this truck that we removed. And this whole thing has to go. We're not going to be using that anymore. It's already been cut up. I've shown in a video when I was tearing this apart that you could take these beams and this whole thing is just flexing anyway. So there's really not that much support. But the thing that it is doing is it's keeping our frame rails together right now. We don't have any cross connector on this engine cage going across. So I don't want to just go cutting that out until I build a new cross member. So what we're going to do is, I got some tube disconnects here for some 1 3/4 tube. We are going to make an 1 3/4 120 wall DOM cross member that's going to go in here. And I don't necessarily know if this is going to stay where I put it. I'm going to weld it up in a spot that is easily accessible, and there may be it may be needed to be cut out at a later date. I really just want these frame rails to stay tight together, and it may stay in there, but there's a lot of stuff that I got to kind of get in here and get cut out and moved before that's going to really be able to tell me if where I'm putting this is going to be able to stay. I'm going to run a cross member kind of right underneath. This motor has a dry sump setup on it, so it does not have a deep oil pan. So I'm going to try to go right under through here, right on where the back side of the beams are going to be. And then if we can get that in, that'll allow us to come in here. Like I said, we're going to remove that brake booster. We'll probably take these bumps out. We'll cut this cross member and the old pivots all out. It'll allow us to get in here. I'm going to rework some of this engine cage. This is an 1 3/4 120 wall DOM main tube. These are some 1.5 runners. All old shock mounts, all that stuff's going to get cut out. Even, I think this was a factory coil bucket. It looks like, you know, somebody plasma cut this thing kind of close, but then never cleaned it up with a grinder. So that's kind of what I'll be doing. I'll set the GoPro up and kind of get started on this stuff, working on all that. So yeah, got to get a cross member in this thing. We'll have to get the tube bender out probably, bend some little bends. And then, like I said, plasma table, all sorts of fun stuff. Let's get some beams mounted on this F-150. Check it out. First look at the I-beams all mocked up there with the wheels and tires thrown back on. I put the spindles and hubs on. And can't lie, I've been staring at this thing a little bit before I started making this video. After doing that much work, grinding all the old stuff out, the cross members, getting these mocked up on here. This video has taken a course of a couple weeks, maybe even a few, from the time that I started filming the beginning parts of this stuff till I'm at here now. So it is always one of those moments, take an extra 5 minutes and kind of just sit here and stare at it, and you can start really visualizing and seeing what this thing's going to look like once it's all done. So I know in the little talky part earlier, I was talking about what I was going to do in here, cut stuff out, bracing up. I ended up making just a little scrap tube cross member that's welded in there. Decided I wasn't going to put any time and effort into making the real cross member, to just, if I had to cut it back out. So that's what I did. I made up a piece that was really quick. I welded up some tubes and just welded it to the frame. That allowed me to then cut the engine cross member all out. So now we have nothing down there. I ended up removing the gearbox, the steering box, just unbolted it from the frame, got that out of the way, got the brakes out of the way. Once I did that, I got the old shock tabs cut off of there, and I actually decided to keep these tubes. There's really I couldn't actually come up with much of a reason for the time and effort to cut those out and redo them. They ended up, everything is braced properly where it needs to be, so those stayed in. Now, moving forward, we are going to do shock mounts up in here, and I'm going to be adding more tube to it. I'm going to have to do a tube through the firewall, probably with a bend in here, tied in somewhere around this corner, and then some plate shock tabs that go in between the two tubes, and then also probably from this corner, we'll do a kicker down to there. So there's going to be more tube work added, and then we'll do crossovers over there for where the shocks are going across, and we'll use those tube disconnects that I showed in that earlier part on that too. Same with the cross member that I eventually will build underneath the dry sump setup under the motor. But anyways, those are a couple things. I just want to address that on there. A lot of times I know I like say stuff in these earlier videos, but then time goes by and I'm working on these things, and a lot of the ideas get revised while I'm working on the thing, and in my mind I'm kind of constantly thinking about the next thing that I'm going to be doing on this thing. You know, you saw me doing a lot of grinding. Grinding work is not like, doesn't take a lot of brain power. You're just kind of sitting there doing it, grinding all this metal out. So I'm able to use my mind to then think about, okay, after I get this done, what's the next thing that I got to do? How are we going to do it? And through that process is kind of how I like, okay, no, that's not going to work. We're going to change it up. We're going to do this or whatever. Now I'm just yapping. But there is the first look. I measured this thing out. We're at 91-inch track width right now. I need to now get the radius arm started and the radius arm mounts in there, so that way I can actually cycle this thing. As far as setting up the pivots, I actually was able to just use, since this thing was already a beam truck and had bump stops on it, I kind of used that as my center line mark and then positioned my beam pivots off of that. And now then, yeah, I need radius arms in here attached to the tabs I welded on. So that way I can start cycling this thing through and make sure we got all the clearance on the steering and everything we need on the fenders. I do have a little over an inch, which I might end up needing to do it on the heims. The heims are not turned all the way in right now. A lot of times I'll set those things like 6 turns out when I build stuff and then adjust from there once it's on the truck. So with that, I think there's like an inch and a quarter that I can turn those heims in yet and bring that track width in more to like a 90-inch if need be. But we won't determine any of that until I'm got radius arms on there and cycling all that. So the next thing after radius arms will then be swingers and steering. So kind of all the next stages, getting that stuff on there, start cycling everything, being able to push the tire up and down. But yeah, like I said, I just keep stepping back and taking the whole thing in. You can really get a view and image of what this thing is going to look like with those beams now on there. And then I don't remember, I know I wrote it down somewhere what the track width was on the old setup, but I know it was high 80s for inches. So we are a few more inches wider than what it was, and I can really tell the stance of it has really changed. It looks a lot more, I don't know, aggressive looking stance. But yeah, this pumps me up, gets me pretty excited. Get those next things on there because I really want to put shocks on there. We got the shocks all here, but I need to get all this other stuff on there first, and then we'll fit the shocks accordingly around that. So excited to get that stuff on here, get to the next stage. But for now, hope you enjoyed this video, checking out the progress here on this F-150. This is kind of my main focus right now, getting this thing done here in the shop. Trying to get this one back. The dunes have just opened up, so this is the closest project I have to getting on the sand. So trying to get this one back to the owner and get this one out on the dunes. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Peace.